The African elephant, hunted almost to the point of extinction in some parts of the continent. But now the hunted has become the hunter. In southern Africa, orphaned bull elephants are going on the rampage. The consequences for other animals and a tourist have been deadly.
We are seeing problems or experiencing problems in some of the nature reserves where these calves have grown up without what we can call parental guidance.
Animal X travelled to the Pilanesberg Game Reserve in South Africa's northwest province, where the young male elephants have gained a reputation as dangerous delinquents. The picturesque Pilanesberg Reserve is located in an eroded volcano, more than 1,000 million years old. But developments in the last 20 years appear to have altered the balance of nature with bizarre results. Almost all of the animals on the reserve have been moved here from other parts of the country. In the past 20 years, 6,000 creatures have been given new homes here. Among them, elephants from South Africa's world-famous Kruger Park. For 2 decades, the elephant population in the Kruger Park was managed by culling older animals and moving the young elephants to other parks. The largest group of 35 was translocated to Pilanesberg. What wasn't considered was that the young elephants would grow up without older elephants to exercise discipline, deprived of the strict social structure of a herd. As a result, the youngsters have written their own social rules. They've become like unruly teenagers, prone to throwing their 5 tons of weight around whenever they feel the urge.
Problems that are seen are abnormal behavior from young elephant bulls that are coming into must for the first time, staying in must for a prolonged period, and that causes more aggression towards people even, and also towards other animals.
A German family was a tragic victim of a teenage delinquent's bout of aggression 5 years ago.
Jenny.
Hans-Richard Zilligan, his wife and 2 young children were enjoying a weekend in the Pilanesberg Game Reserve when they stopped to take photographs of an elephant. The animal wandered off into the bush, then, without warning, charged towards the car. The family's 2.5-year-old daughter Jenny was thrown out of the vehicle as the crazed elephant hurled it about. Ursula Zilligan managed to clamber out of the crushed car and ran for her life carrying their 14-month-old baby. Her husband hid Jenny under a bush where she stayed until help arrived. Hans-Richard Zilligan wasn't so fortunate. He apparently distracted the elephant, drawing it away from the spot where Jenny was hidden. The elephant charged, trampling the 30-year-old father to death. The Zilligans' mangled car is evidence of their horrific ordeal and the ultimate sacrifice that Hans Zilligan made for his family. This unprovoked incident is unusual in normal conditions, but rangers have noticed an alarming and unnatural incidence of aggressive behavior in the young, unsupervised elephants. Rhinos have been the most frequent victims. This line of skulls at Pilanesberg bears testament to the statistics. 23 rhinos have been killed by young bulls in this park alone. The deadly rivalry only occurs when young bulls have grown up without the guidance of older animals and competition from the dominant males in the herd.
In the Kruger National Park we have over 4,000 white rhino and we have over 9,000 elephants, and up to now we haven't seen any death of a white rhino being caused by an elephant. So I believe in a normal, natural situation, you won't have anything like that.
But the elephants don't always come out on top in this abnormal environment. This cow has been left with a huge gaping wound from a fight with the hippopotamus. A team of park rangers and vets sets out to tranquilize the elephant so they can treat her injury. Elephants and hippos aren't natural enemies, but this is not a natural situation. The young cow was part of a circus before being moved to the Pilanesberg Game Reserve. Her attacker grew up in a zoo before becoming a river-dwelling bully. The elephant's experience in a circus left her unprepared for dealing with an aggressive hippo.
We have two tamed animals, and the one not giving way to the other one, and there you can expect aggressive behavior. Again, in the wild, you don't see anything like that. Under natural conditions, an elephant and a hippo will never be able to clash.
No doubt this elephant will be more wary the next time she encounters a hippo. Pilanesberg may be home to an unnatural collection of animals, but the abundance of wildlife is a magnet for visitors. From dawn until well after dusk, tourists in open-top jeeps pursue the wildlife. They're intent on pressing closer and closer for a better look, a clearer photograph. The pride, obviously unsettled by the experience. The never-ending attention of tourists adds to the tension for elephants. Here, tourists are prepared to give this group the right of way, but their presence adds to the powder keg. The South African government has ended the practice of translocating young elephants from the Kruger Park. New techniques now mean that whole families can be moved. But the consequences of 2 decades of dubious practices are just becoming alarmingly clear.
Of course, there are many animals that have suffered as a result of man's meddling with nature. Israel's biblical lions, once free to roam the Holy Land, have now disappeared, although their direct descendants live on. But just what is the myth and legend behind these formidable creatures?
In biblical times, one animal dominated tradition and folklore. In Hebrew, its very name can mean fear and terror. Yet it apparently completely disappeared from the land where it's said to have ruled. Animal X traveled to the Holy Land of Israel to track down the king of all beasts, the biblical lion, and to find its place in the heart of religious mystery.
We read of people who suffered from attacks by lions in the Bible, in the book of Judges, in the book of Kings, often mentioned lions roaming the area.
Rangers patrol the harsh and isolated desert landscape, tracking and attempting to safeguard the few remaining biblical animals: hyrax, ibex and deer, even leopards. But lions, if they ever existed here, have vanished from the zoological map.
One of the last places in Israel where we can still find those biblical wild animals are in the Judean desert. Israel is such a small country, and it's so crowded with villages, farms, cattle, lamb, all these animals, that lions will be a very big danger for the people.
Images of lions appear on ancient carvings, mosaics and tapestries, a symbol of power believed to connect the spiritual and the physical worlds.
We are told in the story about Samson in the book of Judges that he is on his way to a vineyard down to fight the Philistines. He meets a lion there, and it says there that he, without weapons, was able to rip the lion, so to speak, apart and to kill it and to defeat it in mortal combat.
The Bible says, "So Samson went down to Timnah with his father and mother. As they were going through the vineyards there, he heard a young lion roaring. Suddenly the power of the Lord made Samson strong, and he tore the lion apart with his bare hands as if it were a young goat." In Jerusalem's biblical zoo, a new generation come face to face with what may be direct descendants of the biblical lions. Brought back from Asia, these magnificent creatures were found to have the same physical characteristics as those described in the Holy Scriptures.
This is a lion that fought with Samson. This is a lion that lived here and extinct on the 12th century. The main thing that different this lion than the common African lion is his big mane on the body of the male. It's a darker and bigger, wider.
The power of the biblical lion is such that its immortalized image is to be seen all over Jerusalem, an ancient symbol of royalty and even the word of God, to be both feared and revered.
Suleiman the Magnificent, the Sultan who ruled Israel at the time, had a dream. And in the dream, he was told that unless he rebuilds the walls around Jerusalem, he'd be eaten alive by some lions. And today, the walls around Jerusalem have what's called the Lion's Gate, which legend has it dates back to that dream that Suleiman had about the lions.
Whether or not Samson did kill the lion, many men followed in his footsteps, with weapons rather than bare hands. Men with a desire to take on the courage and strength of this formidable beast by defeating it are said to be responsible for its destruction over 700 years ago. Today, the wide, lion-colored desert craters no longer camouflage hidden danger. But while the lions may not have survived, their power lives on in biblical stories and legends.
From Israel's barren deserts to the dense bushland of eastern Australia, many say it's home to a large, mysterious beast that's become known as the Yowie. After the break, we meet those who say they've encountered him.
We saw a sort of hairy, ape-like thing that probably would have stood about 8 feet tall.
Welcome back to Animal X. It's Australia's answer to America's Bigfoot, a large, hairy, two-legged creature that's been seen by many but remains elusive. So where could it be hiding? We linked up with a posse of Yowie hunters to try to find out.
In April 1979, in the Blue Mountains of New South Wales in Australia, 2 bushwalkers found a dead kangaroo beside the track. Nothing unusual in that, except that it seemed to have been torn apart.
Look at it. Look at it.
All the flesh had been ripped away from its back legs. A little further down the track, they found a huge footprint and had an eerie feeling that they were being watched. They were. Hiding in the trees was what they later described as a huge beast, at least 3 meters tall, looking like a man, not an ape, and covered in short gray hair. That same year in Queensland, 2 16-year-old pig shooters stopped for a sandwich lunch near a creek.
I don't know about you, mate, but I'm starving. Did you see that? Look, it's looking at us.
They were startled by a 3-meter-tall creature that suddenly appeared out of the bush. They shot at it, then followed the thump-thump of its stride along the creek bed. Later, they found huge 3-toed footprints. They are convinced they had an encounter with a Yowie, mountain man, beast of the bush. Australia is just one of the many parts of the world reporting encounters. The Yeti of Nepal, Bigfoot in the USA, Gorilla Man in Pakistan, and from the hill tribes of Vietnam, creatures called forest men.
I find it very convincing evidence. The question I am always asking myself, or asking those people who don't believe in these sightings, why don't you believe it?
Dr. Helmut Hoof-Hiesewa is an anthropologist and visiting fellow in the Faculty of Asian Studies in Canberra, Australia. He has been studying Yowie sightings for 40 years and recently led an expedition to North Vietnam, where he recorded hundreds of first-hand encounters of wild men. Powerfully built, hairy, man-like creatures, just like the Yowie. He believes that Australia is home to at least two forms of primitive Yowie. One, a large ape. The other, an ancient species of Neanderthal man that has somehow avoided extinction. Animal X traveled to the Blue Mountains, 50 kilometers west of Sydney, to try to find out just what it is that's out there. One small, deeply wooded valley is home to at least one Blue Mountains Yowie, according to the locals. If it makes an appearance tonight, we'll see it. This heat-detecting camera will penetrate even the darkest bush. If he comes out tonight, he'll use this path through the swamp. This clear footprint was preserved after one late-night encounter. It's large, much wider than a human foot, and it was made by something heavy, sinking deeply into the soil. And there's this photo, caught by an automatic flash, triggered by movement. It's just possible to make out a large creature hiding in the bush. Is this the face of a Yowie? He's been a regular visitor over the last 10 years. Those who've seen him say he's about 1.80 meters tall, but weighs at least 150 kilos, and he's all muscle. No one in the valley wants to see him harmed or captured, and we were asked to keep this location secret. Scientists are divided about the existence of this strange creature. For conventional anthropologists, there are obvious problems with Yowies in Australia. For one thing, how did they get here?
This continent has never been connected by land to mainland Asia, which is why nothing bigger than a rat or a bat, or until humans came, they crossed into Australia. And we brought the dingo, the Aborigines brought the dingo, but a giant ape could cross 40, 50 kilometres. They'd have to be very good oarsmen, raft builders. No, it's nonsense.
Here is that creature, seen by hundreds, if not thousands of people. And how come that creature is here?
Our long night in the Blue Mountains begins. All we can hear are the early evening sounds of suburbia. 50 meters away in the bush, our heat-seeking camera transmits a blank screen. While it's true that some sightings appear to be the work of hoaxers and charlatans, here in the nation's parliament is a Yowie witness whose motives cannot be questioned. Bill O'Chee is a senator in the Australian Parliament. At the age of 13, he was at a school camp in Queensland. From his window of his cabin, Bill was one of the first to see a huge creature.
Basically, we saw a Yowie. We didn't know what they were at the time. We saw a sort of hairy, ape-like thing that probably would have stood about 8 feet tall. It moved in a sort of slightly crab-like fashion, and we observed it for probably about half an hour. We went up afterwards, we saw where it had been lying down in the grass. The impression of the animal was very clear in the grass. We followed it up to the tree line where it had disappeared. I didn't go in, but it was obvious that there was a trail of destruction where it had gone, broken branches and so on. But they lost the track in there. The teachers and boys lost the track. I was one of 2 or 3 boys sitting at the edge of the tree line, looking back down the hill, and it apparently reappeared behind us, but we couldn't see it. That night, there was a lot of noise very late in the night, and when we woke up the next day, we found huge shrubs had been ripped out by the roots, thrown around the surrounding paddock, and that there were very large footprints in the soil. Now, I'm a fairly strong fellow, and there's no way even today I could have ripped plants that size out by my bare hands. So whatever it is immensely powerful.
But the sightings that he and his classmates experienced are still not enough evidence for some.
You can't say that people didn't see something, but unless they have photographs, and funny, with all the cameras in the country, nobody's produced a good photograph. And the only bit of film I've seen of the North American one looks suspiciously like a man in a gorilla suit ambling along. So I'm not saying that people didn't see things, but in the half-light or in the bush or that, and maybe susceptible kids, you know, you can get your imagination worked up. And once one person suggests it, the rest begin to think that they maybe even believe that they've seen it.
Sir, what's that?
No, it wasn't mass hysteria because we didn't know what these things were.
Don't touch it.
There was physical evidence, and importantly, there were masters there as well. When we came back, we were told that we weren't allowed to talk about it. The masters didn't want the word getting out, but they'd seen the evidence as we had.
In the bush, it's now -4 degrees. The heat-sensing camera records only our clumsy progress to change batteries. It's been a disappointing night for us and the local residents. So what is out there? Right now, we don't know. Even solid eyewitness reports don't provide enough physical evidence for anything but speculation. But Dr. Hisawa remains positive.
Why escape the inescapable conclusion that there is something there?
Eventually, someone may capture one or come across physical remains. Until then, the Yowie will stay the monstrous, mysterious beast of the Australian bush.